Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Derek Tsai from LearnByBlogging.com. Today, I want to give you a book review of this book called David and Goliath: The Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants by Malcolm Gladwell. So this is the book. Malcolm Gladwell has another hit book here. I wasn't sure when I wanted whether I wanted to read the Bible story, the David and Goliath story. I spent too much time in my childhood reading Bible. But Gladwell's interesting angle on this simple Bible story was very impelling, and it got me interested. And I listened to the audiobook that was narrated by Gladwell himself, and which was simply delightful, and he's a very good a master storyteller. First, I was confused by the theme of the book was all about. Okay, so Glad is not as strong as it was supposed to be, strong and formidable, and David was not really as disadvantaged as what the Bible we are led to believe from the way the Bible story was told. So what is the rest of the book about? There are three parts to the book. The first part, Gladwell highlights the advantage and of the disadvantages and the disadvantage of advantages. Kind of twist around, make people kind of think about different angles. Gladwell painstakingly told many stories, including the Vivek Ranadives, a Redwood City basketball team who played a full court pressed because lack of talents, and because of that, they actually won lots of games. So David versus Goliath, was David really a disadvantaged position, or is actually the other way around? And the second part, Gladwell touched on the story of desirable difficulties. Difficulty like dyslexic or losing parents in the childhood are really desirable. He covers some stories about that. And this last part, the third part, Gladwell drew into the limitation of power and the legitimacy of power. So the California three strike law, the Northern Ireland, Andre Trotman's story was described and used for his arguments. So this is a very encouraging book for people who are disadvantaged, like dyslexic or others, or just born to poverties, or you may want to find a way to turn it into an advantage for yourself and bring down the seemingly favor odd competitors. So for those in power, Goliath, you might want to find ways to legitimize your power and don't abuse your power. So overall, it's an excellent book, interesting book. I highly recommend. So here's a quick summary of the books. Part 1 is advantage of disadvantages, or the disadvantage of advantages. The Vivek Ranadives Redwood City basketball team playing full court press game against more talented teams, and won most of the games. And Teresa DeBrito's class size. Gladwell introduced the inverted U-shaped curve. This is for academic achievement versus class size, and the parenting difficulty versus wealth. So this inverting U-curve is actually a diminishing return curve in the business term. So is too small a class size makes it actually make it hard for students to achieve academic excellence. Their class discussions are difficult, and there's no diversity for kids to hide among the peers, and too much wealth makes the parenting difficult. Hard to teach the value of money, and they actually lose desire to excel. It's a non-linear relationship, basically. Chapter 3, Caroline Sachs. This is the French impressionists decided to have their own art show instead of competing for a salon, which in those days, in the 17th or 18th century, was the de facto kind of the Academy Award for arts. And they don't really value the impressionist, and so it pays to be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. So Caroline Sachs joined the Brown University to become a small fish in a big pond of excellent biologist, and she ended up dropping out of the science major that suffers from the relative deprivation. So the big ponds actually makes very bright students, but very undemoralizing them. So same thing applies to affirmative actions. So that's part 2. I'm sorry, that was part 1. And the part 2 is the story of desirable difficulties. David Bowes is a dyslexic who turned his disadvantage into an advantage using his listening skill to become a famous trial lawyer. So people tend to practice capitalization learning, meaning that you keep doing what you're good at instead of the compensation learning, which is compensating for what you are poor at, like listening instead of reading for a dyslexic person. So being disagreeable also help you to innovate, like IKEA's founder Ingvar Kamprad. So being accustomed to failures helps, like Gary Cohen's story about how he started in the option business by faking it as in the taxi ride to the airport with the key decision maker. So there's a lot of story about that. And Cohen becomes the president of Goldman Sachs. Okay. Chapter 5, Emil J. Frederick. Jay was a brilliant physician, became very successful at taking care of the childhood leukemia patients because his remote miss. And Gladwell went into this concept of a remote miss in the World War II London bombing. So as a child, losing his father to suicide in the tough childhood growing up, just like the Londoner during the World War II, the remote misses who survived the German bombing turned out to be tougher and more courageous and more optimistic than the others. Of course, if you are near miss, you tend to be more devastated. So the conquering of the fear produces exhilarations. So in the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr. allies Fred Shuttleworth, who encountered 3 remote consecutive misses, becomes a very courageous, more courageous each time. And chapter 6, Wyatt Walker is one of the Martin Luther King Jr. Right-hand person. So Wyatt Walker used trickery to get a photo of the boy being attacked by a police dog and generated momentum behind the civil rights movement, getting the bystanders actually join the movement and making things like the parade or the movement is bigger than it should be. So when he does that, the bystander joined the movement during the commute time, and so it makes it it's more almost like a trick to make it a lot bigger than it should be. So the story underlines how underdog can be resort to trickery to their advantage. On the part 3, which is the limit of power. So this part is a little bit separate from all the other theme, and it goes into kind of focus on Goliath and how Goliath or how the giants actually bring themselves down. So chapter 7, Rosemary Lawler. Gladwell told a story of the North Ireland and how it became a sore point for England by using the principle of legitimacy, namely, number 1, people who are asked to obey authority have to feel like they have the voice. Number 2, the law has to be predictable. Number 3, the authority has to be fair. So getting criminals, insurgents to behave turned out to depend on legitimacy as getting children to behave in the classroom. So the success story, a police officer named Joanne Jaff in Brownsville, New York, in reducing the instance of robberies reinforce the importance of established legitimacy of the authority. On chapter 8, Wilma Dirksen is in this chapter, Mike Reynolds, the father of the Kimber Reynolds, and he started a three-strike law campaign in California and won after losing her daughter to a couple of crystal meth addicts with a long crime history. So the book goes into more detail about the story behind that. So did the strike law actually bring down the crime rate in California? Maybe not. Or is it similar to what British did in Northern Ireland? Do they have the legitimacy of power? So Gladwell discussed the inverted U curve again, and the argument for the three-strike laws are, number one, raising the cost of committing a crime for the criminal. Number two, the extra year of criminal behind bar is another year that he can commit a crime. But in these two arguments, they can be debated with the a criminal without a stake in the cell really don't have a cost to consider, and people don't really like don't really put a social toll, and the people don't actually commit crime past a certain age in the mid-20s. So, and the extra cost, extra time actually puts a social toll on the family and the young children of that family. So the collateral damage is actually bigger in the three-strike law. So the magic number from the book is that the 2% of neighborhood goes to prison. Anything more than that, you're starting to see a crime rate goes up again. So that's the U curve of the crime rate starting to reverse. And in the chapter, Wilma Dirksen is a young mother who lost a daughter, Candace, to a sex criminal who chose not to follow the path. She chose not to follow the path of losing their health and sanity and their marriage if they allow their daughter's murder to consume them. So she chose to forgive and understand the limitation of power and embraced the advantage of disadvantages. On the last chapter, Andrea Trotmey's story, one of the defiance and courage. In the time of German occupancy of France in 1940s, he lived in La Chambon, a village near the Italy and Swiss border. And as a marginal and disadvantaged, he actually took on hiding the Jews from the government in defiance of the law and order and the power. And because it's in their nature, after being persecuted over a century in their neighborhood, in their village, because of their religion. Okay, so these are all the summary of the chapters. It's a very good book. I really enjoy reading the book, and storytelling was just amazing. And I just, I think I get a lot out of it. So if you like, please go and get this book and enjoy the book. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. If you like the summary, please subscribe in my learnblogging.com or the YouTube channel. Thank you.